Welcome everyone to the February 27th Site Plan Review Committee subgroup for the NSTA project. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7th, 2022. Members of the SPRC subgroup for the NSTA project are participating both here in person and virtually through electronic means. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the SPRC webpage, the project page, the county's events calendar, and the emails notifications sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meetings, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sounds to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: for SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance and for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comments, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who were planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments should be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn off your video feed and raise the virtual hand in Teams. I will monitor the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. If a subgroup members are participating via phone today without the video option, please announce your name and group you're representing. And now I will verbally check in to see if you wish to be recognized, as you do not have the video feed option. For members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you will be called on to speak at the end of the meeting and will be allotted 2 to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for virtual attendees or provide a staff with your name if in person, and you will be added to the speakers list. Lastly, this is a public forum and today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county's website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. Now we'll go around the room and please introduce yourself and who you are associated with.
Peter Robertson, Planning Commission.
Jim Lantalmy, Planning Commission.
Aldous, Vice President, Colonial Village 2 condominium. I'm also representing condominium 3.
Alicia Buck, Mary.
Andrew Painter with Walsh Colucci on behalf of the applicant.
George Shapinsky, President of the Board of Applicant.
Lauren Riley.
From TQE.
Sorry, Lauren Riley with Walsh Colucci.
Yes, Harley with the Planning Commission.
Ann Long, I'm president of the Bar HOA, the Brompton of Boston. I'm Courtney Badger with Arlington County Planning.
And we could go around the room.
Richard Benchea, DES Planner for Development Services Bureau.
And I'm Emma Martin with Planning as well.
And sorry, if you guys find Stuart Stein from Radnor for my High Civic Association.
Back there.
Lee Smith.
Brian Eskew with the applicant.
Drew Whitehead, I'm a neighbor.
And then could we have online if there's any commissioners?
And Chris Slatt with the Transportation Commission.
Carolyn Haynes, Forestry and Natural Resource Commission.
Anyone
Neil
else?
Hunter, Parks and Rec Commission.
I think there's also Terry Krell virtually.
Hello, this is Doris Ray from the Disability Commission.
I heard Disability Advisory Commission. Can you say your name one more time?
Doris.
Doris. Awesome. Thank you, Doris. Yes. Terry, you're muted. Terry is here. Great.
With the Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Anyone else online? Okay, are you ready for me?
Yeah. So I will give a presentation for staff. So I'm just gonna take a second to share the screen here.
You can disconnect this.
So good evening. Again, I'm Courtney Badger. I am a planner with Arlington County, and I'll be giving the presentation on behalf of staff this evening. And in this presentation, I'm going to highlight the policy guidance and documents that we use as staff when reviewing this project, really related to the 4 agenda topics for tonight: site design, building height and massing, architecture, and landscaping. So just to start out, orient you to where the site is that we're talking about. It's in between Wilson Boulevard and Clarendon Boulevard, adjacent to Road Street. It's zoned CO 2.5 and it's categorized as medium office apartment hotel in the general land use plan. And those 2 things are not proposed to be changed with this site plan. Currently, the site is developed with an office building and 2 restaurants: Il Radicchio, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and Roadside Grill, which you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of this screen. It's adjacent to a 6-story residential building. There's an alley that runs between that residential building and the office building that's proposed to remain, that provides access to an underground parking garage and loading areas, which are also proposed to remain and provide support for the proposed building. This site is within the Roslyn to Courthouse Urban Design Study area. So that is the guiding planning policy document for the site, and I'll reference it throughout the presentation. Roadside Grill and Il Radicchio restaurants are listed on the county's historic resource inventory as notable and minor, respectively. And in 2005, the county board approved a GLUP amendment rezoning site plan to redevelop this site, and you can see a plan view of that on the right, with a 6-story office building, and that included the demolition of Roadside Grill and Il Radicchio restaurants. That site plan approval is still valid. It's valid through if the proposal that we talk about tonight is approved, it would supersede that site plan approval. So the applicant is proposing to amend that site plan to demo the 3 buildings on the site and construct a new 7-story residential building containing 188 residential units and approximately 12,000 square feet of retail gross floor area on the ground floor. So listed on the screen are some general policy and site-specific guidance related to site design, taken from the Roslyn to Courthouse Urban Design Study. I'm going to highlight a few things that this project is doing that conforms to the guidance. So the building follows the back of sidewalk. It eliminates curb cuts and an existing surface parking lot. The alley is being maintained, and it is providing parking and loading access. It has a protected pedestrian walkway. That's something that is called for in the design study. And active uses align Road Street with retail and retail equivalent uses along Wilson and Clarendon Boulevards. And this is in line with the Arlington Retail Action Plan. There's entrances at the corners of the buildings, which is specifically called for in the urban design study. Sidewalks along Wilson and Clarendon Boulevards have a minimum of 16-foot sidewalk, allowing for an 8-foot clear zone. Except for this encroachment of residential stoops on Clarendon Boulevard that are the red slivers circled in yellow here, that create a pinch point of approximately 6.5 feet. The Roslyn to Courthouse Urban Design Study also has some height recommendations for this corridor. So this block and the block to the east are identified to have a recommended height of 5 stories. The urban design study recommends 5-story height. The current approval that's active on the site allows for a 6-story height, and the applicant's proposal that we're discussing now requests a 7-story height. So although the urban design study recommends 5-story height, the zoning district allows up to 16 stories. Additionally, the urban design study states that buildings should respect the existing buildings and provide an architectural treatment at the 2nd floor to relate to achievable buildings. And it does specifically call out that height flexibility is available, particularly for projects that have affordable housing, community facilities, or any other special design considerations. So here's another view of that height profile that is outlined in the plan. So the urban design study, kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of envisions this like bowl elevation. So where the higher heights are on the east and west of this section, excuse me, and then it tapers down to the quote unquote bottom of the bowl, which would be this site and the block to the east, being the lowest elevation. And in the bottom view, you can see how the applicant's proposal falls into that view. And this is looking Clarendon, looking at the site. And here's a proposed development look from Road Street. So it's like you're looking from West Road Street, looking at the site. You have Colonial Village on the right-hand side, and the Brompton on the left. And here I'm going to talk briefly. I know the applicant's going to go into more depth on the architecture, but you can see some renderings of the architecture. The urban design study recommends an architectural feature on the corner of roads. The applicant is proposing to have this rounded corner to fulfill that and to pay homage to the roadside grill. Additionally, they do have a carve out at the 2nd floor and courtyards on Wilson Boulevard and Clarendon Boulevard to break up the massing of the building. Finally, just a couple numbers I want to point out in regards to landscaping. The proposed tree canopy is 16% tree canopy coverage. The 5 trees that are on the site today are proposed and replaced with 18 new street trees along Wilson roads and Clarendon. And there are 15 other trees on the site proposed to be planted at the 2nd floor courtyards on both the Wilson and Clarendon side. Finally, just to give you an overview of where we're at in the process, we're at the first SPRC meeting. There'll be a second SPRC meeting in April before we go to commission meetings, and that will be Transportation, Planning Commission, and possibly Housing Commission, and then going on to the county board. So with that, I will stop my presentation and we'll hear a presentation.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Andrew Painter with Walsh Colucci, and it's good seeing you all here this evening and online. What I'd like to do is just sort of provide a brief overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to George Chapisky, who is the managing principal at Fortis, just to give some introductory remarks from his company's perspective. And then Alicia and Jeff Krebs will walk through the architecture and the biophilic elements of the project. This site was originally approved, as many of you all know, back in 2005, as Courtney mentioned. And it was really to serve as a new headquarters for the National Science Teaching Association. I think we all know what has happened to the office market since that point in time, but NSTA's office needs have clearly decreased. The organization no longer needs a new headquarters building. Fortis purchased the site outright last year and immediately began thinking about a new vision for the property. And as we've gone through the last, I'd say probably 10 months or so, we've developed kind of design drivers for this. And I think that'll come out, in Alicia's presentation, but also in our discussion. The first design driver was to increase the county's housing supply, especially between the boulevards of Wilson Boulevard and Clarendon Boulevard. Recognizing, of course, that it is a transit-rich environment. The second design driver is to complete out the urban design intent of the county's policies in terms of streetscape and architecture on the site. The third is to deliver ground floor retail and restaurant opportunities that were approved and originally envisioned with the original 2005 approval. But also, if you look at the Roslyn Courthouse Urban Design Study, really calls for this to sort of be an activity center and sort of a social node. And last but not least is to create a physical meeting place between the courthouse and Roslyn neighborhoods. This is sort of in a trough, but we are kind of equidistant between the two metro stations and also between the two neighborhoods. We filed our application back in May of 2023. As Courtney mentioned, the slide mentions we were accepted for processing formally in November of 2023. Before filing, though, we took the step of going through what's called a conceptual site plan. And that is something that the county offers to get early read on things like land use and transportation, setting the ground plane, policies, and that sort of thing. And so several members of staff that are here tonight and online participated in that. And I think that was a very beneficial project with what we eventually filed, because it set forth some clear expectations for a variety of things. And so we're very grateful for that. We have had a couple of meetings with Rayfom. We met with representatives of the Colonial Village community as well. We did reach out to, and I think, I don't know if you got the email or not, but reach out to meet with the Bromptons as well. So we're happy to see representatives of our neighbors here tonight too. So George.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Again, my name is George Chapipsky. I'm president of Fortis Companies, based investment development company focused on projects throughout the DMV. We've currently got a project over at Potomac Yard that we're completing 140 units. We have another project we're taking through the 4.1 here in Arlington, just a couple of blocks away on Fairfax Drive. We've got another one we're finishing up down at the ballpark across from National Stadium. And this site is obviously an important corner. It's been long underutilized, and I feel like we brought together an exciting team here to help realize this block here, and looking forward to learning more about it, teaching you more about it here today this evening.
All right.
Alrighty. So Alicia Buck, I'm an associate principal with Cooper Carey. We are the architects on the job, and I will be the project manager for the project moving forward. So don't want to be too redundant to what Courtney spoke to earlier, and I know we are on a pretty concise timeline here today. Dive right in. All right. We already refamiliarized with the site right between the courthouse neighborhood and the Roslyn neighborhood. And looking at the site design here, there were several high priority items. Number one, providing those active uses along all three sides, all three street fronts. And you can see here we have at the top left our residential lobby. We have a good segment of retail that wraps both of the corners along Road Street. And then we also have the loft units down at the bottom left. Another high priority here in the site design is improving the pedestrian environment. So the first move that we've made is reducing the number of vehicular curb cuts out there today. There's 5 curb cuts. We're taking that down to 2, streamline the vehicular access, but then also provide continuous sidewalks along Arlington roads and Clarendon, which is a big improvement over the conditions today. In addition, we are widening all of the sidewalks. We're providing 16 feet 8 on all 3 sides and introducing those new street trees for a continuous green environment around as well. And then our final high priority item here at the site design level is improving vehicular traffic. So we are maintaining the existing alley, which gives access down into the existing below grade garage. We're preserving that below grade garage. I think that's important both from a sustainability aspect as well as improving the timeline for construction. That's going to save us a good chunk of time in the building. Additionally, off of the alley, we have all of our back of house function for vehicles. So you can see right in the middle of the building, we have our loading dock and trash. Trucks will be able to pull not only off the street, but fully off of the alley and into the footprint of the building, be totally out of the way and leave the surrounding areas free for vehicular traffic. All right, and now I'll hand it off quickly to Jeff Krebs with BICA to speak to biophilia.
Thanks, Alicia. This is Jeff Krebs. I'm the Director of Landscape Architecture at VICA, and I'm here representing both the civil engineering and landscape architecture components. But briefly, I just want to talk about the biophilic elements as defined in the upper left-hand corner, so that we're all on the same page. You know, biophilia is the sort of innate tendency for humans to want to be closer to natural elements. So on this urban site, our goal is to introduce, to the extent that we can, those natural elements. And primarily, we're talking about the ground plane for the public, right? That's the piece that you're going to be seeing, but also for the residents of the building who will be interacting with the courtyards up above, and the two primary ones that you see, as well as the amenity terrace on the upper level. So briefly, we are exceeding the canopy goals for the site with the trees that we're putting in, and we are exceeding the tree replacement requirement, which is a good thing, and it's a challenge. And we want to, that the street trees are the primary component of the ground plane, and it provides that an edge, both a physical and a visual barrier between those folks on the sidewalk and the automobile traffic passing by in the street. So it helps to soften that edge. It also, at maturity, provides that an overhead plane via the canopy, and that can help to, again, soften the urban edge, make a more pleasing environment for folks to be moving through. And then in addition, at the ground plane, where we are able to, not within the primary clear sidewalk, but in the areas between the tree pits, we can introduce other materials, more natural stone, paving stone, brick, sometimes even cobblestone pavers, those kinds of things at the ground plane to introduce a textural change, as well as a visual sort of visual separation from the standard concrete. And those things begin to add up. And then lastly, I'll say we're fortunate enough on the south side, on the Clarendon side, we've been working with Cooper Carey to introduce, in one of the slides you saw, shows the green walls, which introduce a vertical element on the building side. So you'll have the outboard side with a standard, tree pits and lushly planted ground plane, native plants, of course. But then on the building side, we'll also have on Clarendon, we have the southern exposure, so we'll have the opportunity to introduce the green wall elements, which will further soften the urban experience and help introduce some of those more natural elements. And similarly, I won't go into the details, but that you can see on the screen, that's also what we're attempting to do with the courtyard, similar kinds of materiality and lush planting for those small courtyards. So that's what I have to say about biophilia.
Thanks, Jeff. So now we're going to speak a little bit about the building height and massing, and then we'll move into some of the renderings and talk a little bit more about the architectural design. So you can see here the site sections that we've cut. We do feel it's very important to relate to our context, the existing buildings in the vicinity. So the taller buildings in Courthouse to the one side, the taller buildings in Roslyn's the other. Like Courtney mentioned earlier, we're sort of at the bottom of the bowl in the middle, and we want to provide that transition down from those taller neighborhoods. And you can see here on the bottom, this is a section cut along Roach Street looking to the west. So you can see the taller buildings of Courthouse in the background, showing how we are stepping down as you transition down the blocks. All right. So starting here at the southwest corner, this is a view along Clarendon and looking towards the east. You can see here on the left-hand side, our pedestrian and vehicular alley that we are preserving and keeping open to the sky. We think that's an important break in the mass. And a lot of what we're doing with the design here is really meant to break it down. We don't want to just plop a heavy solid box on the site. So we're making several moves here to adjust the scale and make it feel more friendly. So in addition to the alley on the left, further down the block here, you can see a little sliver of that courtyard on the south side. The courtyards are another way that we're breaking up the building. You can also see here that we have recessed all of the balconies along the street fronts. We think that's another way that we're helping break down the boxes. We also have horizontal recesses at level 2. You can see here just a little bit behind the trees. You'll be able to see that better in some of the upcoming slides. We've also introduced a recess at level 7. I think this is an important step to help mitigate the perceived height of the building as a pedestrian as you're existing in the streetscape. And also along this side, we have carved away an outdoor amenity terrace. This will be available for use by the residents of the building. So, and just a little bit quickly here on the materials, we are in compliance with the recommendations of the Arlington Courthouse Design Study. We are providing predominantly brick along the 3 street fronts. So this cream color here that you see in the majority of our facades is brick. And then we also have, to provide a little bit of contrast, some gray fiber cement panels that we're using at some of the recessed surfaces. And in addition, at the residential loft units, you see at the bottom left here, we're introducing some more natural materials with a wood look that sort of plane that goes horizontally across the top and folds down. All right, now moving further down Clarendon here, this is about mid-block right across from the townhouses across the street. You can see that courtyard a little bit better from this angle, as well as some of the green wall elements that Jeff touched on earlier. We think it is really important, sort of been lost in the art of architecture, is providing built-in green around the buildings at the street level. So here on the south side, we're using built-in planters at the residential stoops, as well as these green walls that flank each residential entry. And then moving further down to the right, you can see how we're transitioning from that residential use to the active retail use down on the corner. And here at the southeast corner, you can see that our expression through the majority of the building is very rectilinear. And we're doing that intentionally to contrast with what we think is the most important corner that you'll see here in a little bit. But this side is very rectilinear with sharp corners. Okay, now swinging around to the opposite side of the building, this is the north side on Wilson. And you can see here where the other end of the alley is popping through. We'll have vehicular access as well as a dedicated pedestrian zone. This is going to provide really key porosity into the sort of long length of our city block here. Be a good shortcut for folks navigating the neighborhood. We are looking to improve the alley with that dedicated pedestrian zone. It's built up on a curb so that the folks on foot will have sort of their own safe zone to traverse the alley. It's also protected by these columns that sit between the vehicular zone and the pedestrian. Now, this is about mid-block on the north side on Wilson, and this is the view that you'll get as though you're standing in front of the Colonial Villages buildings, looking across the street. Very similarly to the other side, we've carved out a courtyard looking to break down the mass. Oh,
hi, we do need to keep it moving.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
No problem. Beautiful renderings.
2 more slides.
So, yeah, we're getting close. So as we move further left here, you can see that important corner that I touched on earlier. This really is a nod to the existing roadside grill building where we've introduced the curve and carry that curve all the way up the full height of the facade. And finally, here's what we're calling our 100% corner. This is going to be a really important retail environment. It's got very great visibility, both from a pedestrian approach and from your vehicular approach with Wilson coming right at the corner. And we're looking to make, in addition to the curve, we're also introducing some of the color palette that's on the existing building, the Roadside Grill building, as well as introducing this horizontal at the top of level 1. And this is going to mimic the height and shape of the building that's out there today. All right, so I think that covers all the hot topics, and I'll hand it back to Courtney and Sarah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sarah Steinberger. I'm actually chairing this, though you would not have known that by my late arrival, and I apologize. Childcare has been traveling, you know, the usual. Okay, so first thing I'd like to offer is if there are any clarifying questions for those members of the SPRC. So just to clarify what a clarifying question is. Why not? That is a question on, it's not a substantive question. It's not feedback. It's not a discussion on, I want to hear more about X. It's, did you say the building would have this many stories? That kind of thing. So do we have any clarifying questions around the table? I've seen at least one. Yep.
Just, I think I heard something about the garage and the alley. Can you just go over it quickly on how much of that is remaining versus how much is new?
Sure, it's as though you take the level of the ground at the sidewalk and draw a line straight across. Everything below grade is going to remain. Everything above grade will be demolished.
Please let me know if this is a clarifying question or not. You were talking about the retail and the sidewalks. We currently have outdoor eating spaces with the 2 eateries. What are the plans for this?
Yeah, I'll allow it.
Okay. So we do in that 16'8" dimension from the curb to the face of the building. Portions of that are for the street trees. Portions of that is clear walking sidewalk width. And then there is an area in that zone as well for outdoor seating.
I'm going to have some hands raised. Yeah, I was about to say, I'm going to go to the virtual peoples. So Commissioner Slacks, you're up first.
Thank you. Can staff just remind me if the urban design study that was referenced multiple times in the staff presentation is county board adopted planning guidance or just staff guidance?
It is county board adopted, I believe in the year 2000, 2004, somewhere.
2003.
2003, somewhere in that era, yeah.
Appreciate it.
I see another virtual hand. Terry Prout.
Yes, I wanted to know, we have the protected walkway, but doesn't it pass right in front of the loading zone? And what happens to pedestrians at that location?
You're right. It does pass in front of the loading zone. I think in order for pedestrians to traverse north-south while also maintaining vehicular access, they're going to have to cross paths at some point. Not unlike how a pedestrian walking down the sidewalk would walk across a curb cut. So unfortunately, that is just one of the locations where that crossing traffic is going to take place.
Will there be some kind of, I don't know, lever or something so trucks or things stop before they proceed forward into the area where pedestrians would be walking?
You know, we have not talked about a lever.
No, we're getting outside of clarifying questions.
I'm
now.
sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. But transportation is on the next meeting's agenda, so I hope you'll come back for the sequel.
Okay.
But I can't see it. Okay, Ms. Haynes.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I had this question answered at the walking tour, but just want to make sure, are all the awesome trees that you're planning on planting, so will there be bird-friendly glass also on the buildings?
Yes, that's a good question, and there will be. And in order to meet the threat level of 30 or less, we're going to be providing that on levels 1 and 2 to meet the height requirements.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Hands I can't see, but like. Yep, clarifying question.
Yeah, I wanted to check the adjacent buildings, when you're speaking 7 stories. What is the comparison? I'm looking for that chart in here. The comparison in terms of height, let's say in feet, really, on each side of, well, this is the center. That was supposed to be the bottom of the taper. That's why it was designed. Recommended at 5 stories, and it was very controversial when it was 6 stories. It was only approved because of public use of the conference center, which was the overage over 5 stories.
Right. So, oh, I'm not sharing your screen. Let me grab the screen back for a minute and we can pull sections. Oh. Okay, so yeah, you can see here our immediate neighbor that we are sharing a wall with is this 1919 Clarendon apartment, right, which is within that between Clarendon and Wilson along that corridor.
Right.
And so we are slightly taller than this building. Our goal with the design is visually for that, the top of the 6th story to be the line that you perceive as the sort of primary top of the building, with the 7th story being stepped back from there. So the top of the 6th story is approximately 7 feet taller than this adjacent 1919. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
We can get you those absolute height numbers next time.
Yeah, it would just be nice to see, because it was a big part of discussion back then.
Right.
And the between study has been really instrumental in its purpose, which was not necessarily encouraging development, but actually protecting corridor level development.
Several of the other moves, Steve Smith, Gary, several of the other moves that have been made with the massing of the building were meant to address all buildings that are around it. Colonial Village had its 2-story expression with our recess at the 2nd floor, that streetscape experience that we'll have with that pushed back at the 2nd floor. It reads as a top of parapet that's a little lower, actually, I believe, than Colonial Village there. So that, along with, instead of having a wall along Wilson and a wall along Clarendon, the big deep courtyards that are on the 2nd floor also make those masses a lot smaller, along with the 7th floor setback. So we've worked with staff a good bit. We had a conceptual submission, got feedback from others in the neighborhood as well, and trying to shape and form that building to address not only vertically but also horizontally ways that the expression of the building would feel good. We all experience it at the sidewalk, So I think we're successful in many ways with that.
Yeah, I see. See a lot.
I understand where you're coming from. Just sharing the process a little bit. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yep, so we're interested in parking spaces. Is that appropriate to address here?
No, let's handle that in transportation. And so that would be for the next topic.
Okay.
So I'm sensing we're wrapped up with clarifying questions at this point, and I don't see any hands, although people with better eyesight than me can tell me otherwise. Okay. So the first topic for the agenda tonight, we have 4 topics, is site design. The other topics, just so people have a sense of when they might want to raise a comment, are building height and massing, architecture, and landscaping and biophilia. My general experience has been that things like building height and massing and architecture and to a point site design all sort of blend together. So I'm inclined, if y'all will bear with me, to allow sort of things that fall within those 3 topics to sort of hit the floor at the same time. Less people are like, whoa, that's revolutionary. No, okay, great. And then the last topic being landscaping and biophilia, which we will take as a standalone topic, because I do think that is a little more distinct. So from the perspective of site design, building height and massing, and architecture, does anyone have any questions, feedback, otherwise on those topics? Yes, sir.
So talking about the building setback from the curb, I went out, I live across the street, so I went out and did some measurements. The current NSTA building, which of course is just going away, is 35.5 feet back from the curb. It's got lots of trees, it's green, it's got the transformer covers and so forth. We're all familiar with that. On our side of the street, on the other side of Clarendon Boulevard, which is what I'm talking about, we're 27.5 feet back. Your immediate neighbor up the hill at 1919 is 21 feet. Now, your plans show a setback of 16 feet 8, but in fact, the steps are 12 feet 3 from the curb. So you're actually talking about an effective setback of 12 feet 3 on Clarendon Boulevard, or approximately half what your neighbor up the hill is. So talking about, traffic flow through pedestrian experience and so forth and so on, not to mention you're going to plant trees in that narrow space that are mostly going to overhang the street, I realize. It doesn't compute to me. It seems to me like your mass is a great deal more, especially since I live across the street. So
I think, I appreciate bringing up the topic. So the existing building was built prior to the 2003 Rosslyn Courthouse Urban Design Study. And the standard that we're trying to comply with now does say the 16 foot 8. And so that's meant to be that urban street wall that's continuous down the street. And I don't think that existing setback wouldn't have considered that urban street wall that's now.
Oh, I'm not defending the current setback. Clearly, you know, that's, I'm not saying that anybody, the 35.5 feet that's, it's nice, but even we don't appreciate it and we live across the street. On the other hand, the 21 feet of 1919, it seems to me that, with maintaining the flow down the street and so forth and so on, you would want to maintain that 21 feet.
And I might defer to staff on the policy implications of it. I know Chris Kreider's on the phone too, but yeah, I mean, it is 16 foot 8 feet. That's when we were setting the ground plan, we looked to the existing policy. Staff guided us in that direction. The pinch point is for those loft units, which, really just diminishes the 8 foot clear area down to about 6.5, 6 3/4 or so for that one section of it. So it's certainly not along the entirety of our clear.
That extent is how far? That's 6 feet? We have that pinch point?
Yeah, so there are two sections.
Can we see the image? Can we share that might be visual the discussion?
Okay, either way.
Oh, so I'll pull up this one, just that highlights it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can
That
see,
works.
relative to where the tree pits are. So there's a small bit of overlap right here, where the tree wells overlaps one of the stoops, and then there's another overlap right here. So this one is,
And those tree wells are 5 feet wide, correct? So really, you're talking about a sidewalk that's roughly 7 feet wide at that point. The passable side.
7 feet 9 clear
Okay.
between the top side of the tree pit and the front face of the stoop.
Of those steps, which are effectively not sidewalk. I mean, I know technically the building is offset, but you're not going to have foot traffic through there. So really, we're talking about a sidewalk that's effectively 7 feet 9 inches wide.
So only for a very small.
In those specific areas, just in those specific.
And
areas.
there are 4 of those areas. Agreed, but that's still, I mean, it's effective. I didn't think you guys, would be, are we going to change the design? But I want to point that out. I think that's significant. I really do. Now, the steps for the 2-bedroom loft, which is kind of covered up. I know this image is meant to emphasize the transformer grades. How far, that's also, that also sticks out, if I'm not mistaken. It can't really be shown in this particular diagram, though.
So that position is correct. The front face of the building actually does jog a little bit.
Yeah, you can barely make out the trace of it there. So that's also going to be, thank you. That's also going to be less than, certainly much less than 16 feet 8 and less than, again, my measurement was 12 foot 3 from the curb, less the 5 feet for the trees, but those numbers are probably not correct. I was guesstimating off the drawings that I had available. So it's still narrow through there. It's still fairly narrow. It's definitely a choke point in the sidewalk going all the way up to courthouse.
I'd like to second Peter's concern because as a parent, if you can imagine 2 strollers trying to pass in the night, it's very difficult. Or a stroller and a dog walker. And if Arlington is really trying to get a pedestrian environment, these chokeholds are extremely important, right? We really want them to walk around and go to retail and walk around and enjoy this, that, and the park across the street. So to me, this is a really big concern.
And looking at this systemically, directly across the street, you've got a very narrow sidewalk, which I gather, it's grandfathered in. That townhouse development that's just to the west of Brompton's has a sidewalk, and I don't know if anybody has, that's not even 6 feet wide. It's very, very narrow, and it's got a fence on one side. So people tend to congregate on the other side of the street for that reason. People walk their dogs on the other side of the street. They push strollers and so forth on that side because the old sidewalk, which of course nobody has any intention of doing anything about, nobody can do anything about, that is a big choke point. So now we've got 2 choke points on both sides of the street at roughly the same location. For pedestrians.
I might also say too, as a father of twins, I know about pushing these strollers, especially when they're side by
I'm
side.
looking forward to the day when I get pushed in a stroller.
Make it wider for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I will just say, from an architectural moves perspective, so, all right, so we set the ground plane using the 16 foot 8 inches under the current policy. We had an architectural move here that we actually think works. We think it's visually interesting. Totally get exactly what you were saying about, reducing it. I would also say too that under the city or under the county's, outdoor, when you're talking about, I think you had raised outdoor retail or outdoor restaurant space, that clear zone sidewalk can be reduced for restaurant and retailers down to a clear zone of 6 feet. So this is not an outdoor retail or restaurant, but I'm just saying when you talk about choke points, just keep in mind that there could be choke points all around this site that have nothing to do with the actual building itself.
Agreed, but when we are talking about a 6 or a 7 story building, the noise level is, and we accept this, we didn't buy a house next to the airport and then complain about the plans. But that is going to increase our noise level, our net noise level across the street. It's just natural. It's going to reverberate against that hard surface that you all are building. The closer that surface is, the more noise. So having that a few feet back might improve our quality of life just a tiny bit. So that's another issue, having this facade, which we appreciate that you're breaking up with this architectural design, that you're covering the facade with ivy and things like this, all very good. Do you by any chance have the, I'm sorry.
So I want to keep moving. We have a couple hands raised.
Right on.
That doesn't mean we're going to talk, but I'm going to go to Eric Goodman and then
I cede the floor.
Mr. Goodman, you're up.
Thank you. And I appreciate the discussion about the sidewalk in that area. I just want to know how that compares with the current situation that's there. Are we constraining that sidewalk more than what's currently there along that section?
So there is, out there today, the building face is one thing, but the clear walking width is a different story. And on Clarendon, where the existing loading dock and that curb cut come out, and then there's also the curb cut for the parking for the 2 restaurants. There is a pinch point there where it's, I don't have a measurement on it, but it is very, very, very pinched and single file.
I think keep in mind, we've got a rhythm of street trees that we're adding. I think there's 18 street trees as opposed to the 5 that's in today. So those beds, they will start to pinch some of that down as well. We're still following all the requirements that are there in the small area plan. You've got some pinches at 2 in particular of the stoops. One of those is only, is it 2'10" long area? It's a stride that we're pinching below the required 8 feet, I believe, that's there between the tree pit and the face of a building. So it's minimal. I understand all of the points you're making. We're trying to follow what's in the small area plan.
And
standards that are there.
And you're welcome, because all this is on our property. See all that nice green in your image? That's ours.
Beautiful.
So
We look forward to adding to it.
we're going to go to Chris Kreider, then Commissioner Tommy, and I apologize, I missed the introduction
Kurt.
part, and then Kurt. Okay.
Thank you.
So Mr. Kreider, then the
Yes,
rest of the
good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Kreider. I'm the supervisor for the urban design section, working with staff to evaluate this project. And I do want to point out that staff have flagged the clear distance on Clarendon, and we really are trying to get to 8 feet minimum. There is, and if you want to pull up the plan, you can see that we're asking them to perhaps redesign the stoops a little bit or push the facade back. But one of the challenges is because they're keeping the existing garage ramp into the garage. That is the hard line that they're up against. And so, but we completely appreciate the desire, and we are looking for that 8 foot clear distance. Sergio, I see you're in the meeting. If you want to speak at all to where DES is in terms of the vaults or this clear distance, this would probably be a good time. But yeah, we concur with the opinion. Thank you.
And then I said Commissioner Lynn, tell me, and then I said Kurt.
Yes. One thing I was wondering about with the tree pits right there, which contribute to the pinch point. Is it contemplated that rather than just having a pit with dirt, that there would be one of those permeable grates over it, which would allow for effectively a wider sidewalk because you can walk right up to it rather than walking dirt, walk along that grade also, which will give you a significant amount of extra space for that sidewalk, regardless of how it's being used. Like, for example, on the other side, if this restaurant uses it there, that'll still allow more than just 6 feet.
Yes, we have talked about that, and Jeff, maybe you can speak in more detail. I believe that's not permissible.
Well, what I'll say is that the tree grates have certainly fallen out of favor within the county, but it is certainly a viable solution, right, to increasing the walkable space in that particular area. So I think, we'll continue working with Chris and his staff to try to figure out a way to manage that particular area, because we do think that the introduction of those the stoops along that edge really liven up that streetscape. So, but that is a potential. It just hasn't been used recently. The county has sort of, in general, has moved away from using graded areas, but in this particular location, perhaps.
Part of the reason I also raised it is because nobody then walks on the dirt and it doesn't compact the dirt around the tree, which allows it to breathe and collect more water. It's better, it's more healthy tree, presumably. I thought that's one of the reasons why the grates were used. Wasn't actually to widen the sidewalk. It was to help trees survive longer. But if that doesn't work, rarely it doesn't work, then that's a different question.
I think one of the important things to plan for in using the grate is to make sure that the opening in the grate for the tree is sized from the beginning to be quite large. I mean, the selling point for the selling point for the grates over time has been, oh, well, as the grate gets bigger, you can just come out there with a torch and cut them out. Well, people oftentimes don't do that, right? And so the grates start to go like this. But if you plan for it and have a large opening to begin with, then you can certainly anticipate that, and you have much more. One of the things that happens as the trees grow, their sort of root flare, right, begins to impact as it comes up. It becomes a cone as it comes out of the ground. So it's a bit of a challenge, but it can certainly be accommodated. And as I said, I think we'd be happy to continue working with staff to find a way to mitigate that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think there are a few different problems with tree grates, but I think we can work with our design to see if there's a way that we can work with the design team to figure out how to get that clear with the stoops not encroaching in that area.
I have one more point of clarification, because I was just curious too, and I'm looking at the prior approval. So what's out there today for the NSTA building was 16-foot wide back curb with tree pits. So I just wanted to flag what's approved out there today, unbuilt, but what was contemplated, 16 feet.
Okay, so I saw a hand from Carolyn Haynes, but it's gone down, I think. So Carolyn.
Yeah, I was just talking about the tree pits. We had a lot of discussion about this over the years in the Forestry and Natural Resource Commission, and there are lots of downsides to it, largely because people tend not to maintain them and consequently end up killing the tree as it's trying to grow. And so also, and Chris Kreider mentioned in the chat that it also traps heat, and sometimes that can be quite damaging to the, they can get really hot, and that can be damaging to the roots too. So there are lots of issues with tree grades.
Okay, so I appreciate that feedback. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the chat is not for substantive comments, it is only for technical difficulties. So while the chat function is fun, let's not use it for substantive comments, just raise your hand to be heard. Thank you. I understand how we got to the tree grate conversation with biophilia, well, landscaping and biophilia. We're not actually on that topic. It was the one topic I said we would do later in the agenda. But I do, again, everything relates, so there's that. Anyone else wishing to be heard on site design, building height, massing, and architecture? Yes. Oh, you never have to speak. I'm so sorry.
No, that's right.
You're up.
I'm Kirk Cultus.
I'm honest.
That's right. Kirk Cultus. I'm Vice President of the Colonial Village Condominium 2 and also represented Condominium 3. Just kind of to summarize, we had met early in the parking lot when you had a presentation. We really like the design, all the materials and everything. We think it works well with Colonial Village. I think we have two concerns. I think one probably I can address later in the forum. One's entertainment with the roadside, but I'll deal on one of our main concerns is the height of the building as it relates to solar access. On the original Roseland corridor plan, of course, called for 55-foot high buildings, and least a 20-foot setback above the second level. And what we're concerned about is kind of a precedent, because now we have, for example, Wendy's building, which is 165 foot tall. And what it's doing is blocking a lot of the sun in Colonial Village, which was originally designed 80 years ago with corner units to get some type of sunlight. And so what we're basically, what we believe now is that the height of this building will block sun to nearly a dozen interconnected buildings in Colonial Village along Wilson and within the courtyards and so forth. And so we basically have a request for the design team to the county to kind of do a solar analysis and reconsider the design at the top of your building, see what we might be able to do to increase the sunlight coming through on there, because it definitely blocks. I took a picture. The sun kind of comes up right over roadside in the morning, right above the roof. But of course it rises. So as it rises and you get towards the end of the building, it's not as critical, but around the corner in the morning, it's definitely has an effect. So that's one of our requests on that, is kind of take a look at that, see what could be done.
Great, and actually, so I do remember we talked about that. And we have done a solar shade study with the existing height that we're proposing, with the step back at level 7 and the courtyard carved away. My computer's trying to open it right now. I hope I can get it open in time. But the shading actually that crosses all the way across the street and actually touches the Colonial Villages piece is very minimal. So
No, it's not nearly as tall as the Wendy's building, obviously.
We took that into consideration when we designed it. We did the solar studies. We looked at the massing and how that would affect pieces. And we look at it at several different times during the year. So we look at things like December 21st, the shortest day of the year, June 21st, the longest, and then the 2 equinoxes in between. And we look at different times of the day. This time of year, you'll know that the sun is low in the sky as it moves around. It's a short path. When you get to the 21st, or the old term high noon, it goes much higher in the sky and a much larger path that comes around. So we've got those things plotted out. If we can bring it up.
Yeah, I'm right across the street, so virtually right across where where the H cutout is. And so when I stop there January morning, the sun is barely clears above roadside. So I think it would be totally blocked until it comes towards the end of your building.
Later
then it climbs. So that was our concern about the height restriction, because it definitely affects our courtyard, and we're thinking about 12 of the interconnected units. So, even a story less or something would probably be helpful. So that was really our main concern. Like I said, the design's very good, but that was kind of the main concern. The second one was entertainment, but I think that's a different category.
Yes, well, that's entertainment from the perspective of community benefits, or actually not sure what. Noise. Okay.
I can address that in a different category.
Yeah, it's not appropriate for what's right now.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll add another category. We'll see how timing runs tonight, or we'll definitely do the second one. That's interesting. I thought you meant like storefront.
Oh, so let me raise one more point. Is that the other thing we're concerned of is about a precedent for what happens when they develop the Exxon station. We don't kind of cap the height now. They come in with an 18-story building at the Exxon station. So that's part of our thinking, is what this might mean, because we have the 16-story on the Wendy's lot, and who knows what could go into Exxon. So we're trying to, and that would totally block the sun. Yeah. So that was kind of a.
So one thing I just want to say, since your computer wasn't pulling up those solar studies that you've done, is that something that you could share with folks in this body? So that we'll be able to peruse that, even if it.
We can forward all that stuff through boarding.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you, I can put it on the website also.
That one.
Yeah, appreciate that.
That's the official. Okay, Commissioner Guevara, and then down at the other table.
I understand. Originally in 2005, this was sort of 5-story recommended height, and now 2005 and 6 stories. Now this is 7 stories. actually for me, since it's sort of in Roslyn, right? And you have it right near two metros, and I know we want to sort of push that whole sort of design, I guess, right? For lack of a better term. But, you know, I do think that the reality is that, you know, we have a housing crisis here in Arlington, and it's just unfortunate that, to me, I just wish that we could have a little more higher building height massing there, because, you know, then we could potentially do more affordable units on sites. And you know, obviously, I really do appreciate, you know, some studies, and then we could have more of the aid, but I do think it's important for us to take that into consideration as well, because there are larger issues that we should keep on the table to consider. And at some point, I think we should have that, add that to the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, it's definitely not possible. You know, and this is Road Street. Even if you consider the sector, Road Street, this is more, you might say part of Courthouse, but actually it's neither. It's the area between. I can tell you personally that Carrie Johnson, the whole reason for this was not to be confused with Roslyn, not to be swallowed up by Roslyn or Courthouse. Courthouse at that time was not nearly as developed. A woman named Carrie Johnson saw this coming, and it was definitely not to fill this in. Definitely not. The whole study was about height. And the whole study was about reduction in height, but massing. Definitely massing. They were looking for just this sort of building. And I can understand and agree with and have concern about what precedent we would be setting. I appreciate everything done to come up with approximately 6 feet. But if you remember Chris Zimmerman, he voted against it, against this site plan in 2005 because of the additional height. But the additional height was approved because of the great desire to retain NSTA, the nature of the company, and also because that extra 6th story was actually a conference center. And so because of the public purpose of it and everything else, but the original concept was about limiting height. It was about, there's a lot of density here. And actually, don't be confused at all by the CO 2.5, because I very much complained about the CO 2.5 in 2005 and in other places along the way, because Wendy's, for instance, was not done within the plan. I mean, it was a stretch. It was basically what we ended up with the second SPRC was a problem site that was effectively taken out of the plan and added to Courthouse, but at least by the design of the building, what it was. And many of us had some ones with a lot of negotiations for the first site plan. So I think that the 2.5, very much for this reason, I remember asking planning staff and a number of people, I said, why the 2.5? They said they didn't have the tools, but don't worry about it, because basically this was all built out in terms of approved site plans, and that it would never be used beyond, you know, generally what the plan was, the in-between study. And this is actually an area that is part of, it's not part of the North Fort Myer Heights study, but it is part of Fort Myer Heights, which includes a touch of Roslyn here, a touch of Courthouse here, very distinct and very separate community. And that's why there was an add-on process for North Fort Myer Heights to the south of this to stop any idea of merging the two or any sort of corridor level development within that area. That was the real reason for it. I wish Carrie was here. I'm sure she would explain it much more, much better.
Isn't that why they built roadside green park?
So Commissioner Barrett wanted to clarify one thing, and then we can.
And apologies, I could have been Roslyn per se, so I misspoke on that point. But my larger point is that the reality is that we are changing as a community, right? And do we look forward? Do we try to stop the change, or do we sort of hold the principles that we say in Arlington, that we want to be inclusive, that we want to, or do we try to stop that change and, you know, look back past plans, or do we try to be sort of the values that we claim to have? That's all I'm saying. Take it as you will.
Oh, I understand. Can I just add one thing? And that is that very much part of looking forward is looking forward with an idea of respecting, you know, the whole problem throughout the whole metro planning. When they referred to communities, they said established communities. It's respecting each other, our communities, and the purpose. And if you think that all of Arlington needs to be Roslyn, the whole idea of everything in 77 on all the studies, the midterm, whatever it was, and the next study that was part of the metro development was that under no circumstances anywhere near anywhere in the county should have any way reflect Roslyn, or even half of Roslyn. So yeah, well, maybe there are some places for some things, but it's also very much about respecting each other's community. And Carrie Johnson saw this, and Planning Commission and County Board, as a threat to eliminating a community, several communities and neighborhoods there, Radnor Heights, Fort Myers Heights, and specifically Fort Myers Heights North.
We've moved a little bit away from kind of the site plan feedback, you know, building height and that thing, and I think kind of with the overall community of Arlington and how we're evolving, that's the conversation
I understand.
resolve in this SPRC, although I would get a gold star if we did. Maybe even a cookie. So did you had raised your hand before Commissioner Guevara had made her comments. Do you have anything else to add on that point, or was that unrelated? Or?
Really just to say about, you know, about the height being concerned, the precedent being a concern in terms of the Everblock tapering down,
okay.
But also that the massing in general and large FAR, all of this was beyond what was considered then, was what they were looking for in more of a very much horizontal community as opposed to a vertical differentiated between the two sides.
That, you know, feedback is generally taken. Did the applicant want to respond to that? Or?
No, I mean, I kind of agree with some of the comments that were said, but you know, the study does build in flexibility. I mean, if you look at the original bullseye concept, I mean, the idea of tapering down between the stations, that has been phenomenally successful. I think I would tend to agree with looking at increasing the density slightly. This is not the Wendy site, and across the street for the Exxon, that has a similar recommendation of 5 stories as well. It's kind of the baseline, but there is that language in it that does provide for flexibility in building heights in exchange for community benefits, which is kind of the ticket to ride that we're using here. So we may agree to disagree about that, but that's there is built-in flexibility in the text of the Roslyn Courthouse design, urban design.
I think there's one other thing that's a growing awareness of, call it the string of pearls that is the metro all through Arlington, is that people acknowledge and realize that you want to get a greater level of density to address some of the housing concerns that are across not only Arlington, but across America. That we want to be able to get more people closer to that, to avoid having to use cars, to make it an auto-dominant county at the end of the day. You know, you take advantage of that.
But I would also say that one other thing too, I mean, you know, this, I don't think anybody wants this to be Roslyn. I mean, the heights in Roslyn are, I mean, you're looking at 24 to 30 stories tall. That's not what this is. I think the renderings pretty much show this being much more of a human scale building, and especially with the step backs of the 7th floor, that recessed 7th floor will probably not be visible from most vantage points. So
I do want to go to Ms. Wong. As she waited patiently. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I just have a request for it to be clearly identified, going back to the sidewalk choke points, where the boundaries are for where the outdoor seating for the restaurants would be, because I think you mentioned it's going to take up some of that real estate.
Right. So the entire frontage around the retail, so starting on Wilson, wrapping the corner all the way down Rhodes, and then where the retail wraps the corner on the outside. All of that frontage has the 16'8" depth. And out of that 16'8", we have the 5-foot free pit, the 8-foot clear walking surface, and all of the remainder to the face of the building is that potential outdoor dining zone. So
is there a slide that shows this better? Or if not, for next time, could you have a slide that shows it better?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. No problem. No, and really that's oftentimes what happens the first SPRC. If we say we'd like to see vegetable change, like to see a shadow, what have you, and then make it happen for the second meeting. So. Okay. I did not mean to cut you off. Was that your goal? We're good. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm curious, changing subject a little bit, but I think still on the architect. Comment on materials that you're using, issues around embedded carbon that weren't really clear to me in the documents. And we could start with that one, and then I'd like to talk sort of about the envelope and energy considerations as well.
Right, so to touch on the first part of your question is just the general materiality.
Yeah.
So we do have the brick, we have the fiber cement board. Those are really the vast majority of our materials. Then we also have the wood look along the stoops, along those residential loft units, as well as some metal in the retail frontages and along the canopies. So all of those materials together are in the energy model. We've already done a shoebox energy model to evaluate the energy concerns, and we'll be furthering that energy model along.
We'll also have, we'll be meeting here. Right. So we'll have continuous thermal barriers that are within the composition of the exterior wall. Materials are brought up the embedded carbon. That's one of the big reasons we're keeping the garage. The garage still has repairs that need to be made to it, but we're acknowledging, and our ownership certainly was acknowledging the value from a sustainability standpoint of that embedded carbon, to have that, not, you don't have to go back, take the energy to tear it down and then bring it back. Concrete is one of the biggest materials there are out there that has energy requirements that are very, yes, very extensive. So there's a very conscientious effort there. Say that.
I actually rent one of those working spaces, so I'm counting on you.
So I sort of remember from the conversation that we walked around that you were talking about using lumber on the inside. Can you comment on that? I mean, how does that, or structural?
Structure.
Yeah.
Yes. So the structural system for this building is twofold. We have concrete in the existing low-grade garage that stays. We have concrete for the first 2 floors in what's called a podium from the building code standpoint, and then everything above that is light-duty wood frame, so 2x.
Thank you. Highly renewable. Yeah.
You guys are being too polite. I saw Lynn Tommy's hand first, but you deferred to Commissioner Sarley. So
Going to architecture.
yeah, we're already in
Yeah,
architecture, so
good,
you don't have to go anywhere.
This is one building where the planning commission often will, in SPRC, say, what is an architectural feature? And of course, this is our here. This is like the first time I've seen something that, yeah, that's an architectural feature. The curved corner there, to me, that's an architectural feature. That right away, yep, you made it, that's it. I think it's really important that you have that there, and it's very important that you have replicate the look of the existing roadside grow building. To the extent you can make it as close as possible, not having that brick wall along Road Street, but having plaster is a good change. But the expression of where the bricks go and the detailing of the brick, if that can be replicated with the same material, because my view of that corner, it's always been sort of the landmark driving up from Roslyn to Courthouse. It's like one thing that you notice, it's very distinct. And I think I'd like to keep, personally, I think that keeping that tells you where you are. It's so you know when you're moving up, it's not an anonymous thing. It's, I always have noticed it. And the more we can keep it looking that way, better. And I think we're most of the way there, if not completely. There's some smaller detail that people do. Those this glass box used in there.
2 ways wide around on the outside.
If you could put that back in somehow, again.
It's on the plan, yeah.
But yeah.
That's not gonna be there anymore.
But that's sure you're not sold on the Friday awnings.
I'm wondering if we can say Chevrolet and blue diamonds around the outside.
And the glass, the way the glass, brick and the other materials work together, I think it really is significant. And that's why I'm very happy with the corner, the way you're doing it, because that is the architectural feature. And it works for me. The general massing, I think, is good. I like the courtyards, recessed balconies, breaks it very, very nicely. The window expressions, I think, work well. They have that sort of semi-industrial look. So I think it's a sophisticated building that is good for this site here. Yet it's not anonymous. Overall, I'm happy with it. The discussion on the stoops, generally stoops, I love having stoops. I think we raised some good points as to pinch point, if it can be recessed back a little bit, even if there's means you have an overhang. I have no problem with overhangs. I think in many ways they work brilliantly for streetscape. So, if you could push that first level in a little bit to capture that wall space, but leave above it as is. You lose a few square feet for each of those 3 units. But I would see that as a very acceptable solution on this, because I do like having the entrances to those units right off the street. Yeah, it's great. We have that in a lot of areas. The more we can do, the better. So anyway, that's my opinions on architecture.
So before I go to Commissioner Starley, I understand staff has some feedback with regards to students and things and
Yeah.
whatnot. So
Just
Sergio.
not to be like a dead horse or anything, but we flagged the pinch points at the beginning when we first saw that the stoops were coming into the clear width. A lot of the presentation and the plans show 8-foot clear width. That's not the case by the stoops. And we're working with the applicant to see what type of design that we can rectify to have that actual clear width. That's all I want to say. Yep.
I think I want to also add for the stoops thing is that the stoops are great. There's a lot of stoops on the sidewalk in a lot of these areas. And we find that, a plant that gets hung over the stoop, and then the pumpkin that gets hung over this, and then it just spreads. So that informally should get taken into consideration, I think, for practical life.
Yeah, well, we have stoops on our side, but we also have 27-foot setback on our side. So there's a difference.
So I'm gonna go to Commissioner Starley in a moment because I said that I would, but I think another thing with regards to the kind of stoop expansion that was just referenced with pumpkins and trellises, whatever. I think that's something that also in terms of resident, codes and rules for the building can also be addressed in that. So maybe that's not per se allowed. And that's something that I think, it's not beyond the scope of it to the SPRC here, but I think that might be something that, we do sometimes as feedback, give, when it comes to orienting people to a particular building, things they can and cannot do, what's safe, so on and so forth. So that's something to consider in that regard too. Mr. Sally.
Thank you. I'll just go down my list. I think it might be a little bit repeating some of what my fellow commissioners mentioned, but I think it's good to see a building that doesn't try too hard, and I mean that in a most complimented way that I can say it. It's just, it's building, it's there, it's in the corner. It's doing its thing. It's got its windows, it's got its walls. I would encourage the windows to be a little smaller, not from any aesthetic concern, just from an environmental energy consumption concern. But right now, I think it's really nice proportion. I think some of the breaking up of the mass is nice. I'm not sure that it's needed, but I think it's still nice. I think it's not big enough of a building that you were running the risk of being like an ongoing sentence, right? It's a small enough building that it can hold its own proportion. But anyway, so the solid versus the void and the rhythm is really nice. I think the feature on the corner is really nice also. I'm not sure if I'm totally agreeing with Commissioner Montalmi. I do agree with him in spirit, but I think, I prefer more of the nod than the sort of literal what is it, when the spirit possesses the body? You don't have to be too literal about that. I think the message and the reference is clear. I definitely got it the first time I saw it, and I imagine, you know, everyone will see it too. I think some of the details that would be interesting that people would like, you know, smile, particularly those of us that have been around here for a while, would be nice, you know. So I agree with Commissioner, and tell me, I'm just always a little nervous about people sort of becoming too obsessed with sort of repeating something, you know, and it's nice. I think either way, the direction is really nice, and I strongly support it. I like the horizontal gap between the mass above it and that sort of feature, if you will. I think that really goes a long way in articulating that feature, right? So it really stands out. It's not just part of the mass. You repeat the mass up above, but that gap really accentuates that issue. Again, still being a nod without being too literal. The preserving of the garage, music to my ears. That's just absolutely brilliant. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We cannot thank you enough. Any other parts of the building that you feel like are also welcome? You know,
There are awnings for Roadhouse that might be available. Like,
those might not be that big of an energy pack, so I think it might be okay to throw it. But yeah, I think that's, you know, Joan McIntyre will be elated when she hears about the garage being kept. The steps to the loft, I think that's a genuine concern that one, you know, perhaps doing the walk up straight out of the sidewalk and embedding it into the actual building takes a little bit of the square footage from the units. And I noticed they're fairly small, but you know, it is something that we could sort of push it in, create a little bit of an alcove, almost like a brownstone walk up version, Arlington version. I think the concern with the height, you know, we're sort of both blessed and plagued by this 2+5, you know, code allowance since it came online a few years ago. So no fear of the Exxon site being any taller than 7 stories. I promise you, it's not going to go anywhere taller than that because it's probably going to have the same exact construction, which is the 2, you know, the podium and the 5-story stick built. You know, so I think if that's a little taller than I think some of the community and what the previous plan called for, but you know, I think to take Commissioner Guevara's, who left the meeting, concern about, you know, sort of reaching a sweet spot in the sort of density. I'm fairly comfortable with the 2+5 on this situation, the total 7. I think the other thing is just to sort of preempt Commissioner McIntyre, electrification, you know, no gas, if you can do it in the building, that would be most brilliant. Yeah.
Gonna bring that up.
Yeah, exactly. I
that
think
topic is covered at the next SPRC.
sorry, I just, it's a
Okay,
foreshadowing.
there's a list.
Yes.
Understood. Letting y'all know, so we don't go down the rabbit hole.
Quick question.
Oh, I don't know if Commissioner Charlie's done.
If he's done.
I am done, thank you.
Okay, then, yes.
I was just wondering on the cutout courtyard on Wilson, how wide is it? It's like 30 feet, the courtyard,
Both courtyards are very similar and they're approximately 40 feet wide. and
Okay. 40 feet wide. It's right across. Right.
So that's comparable
It's gonna be
on
the
your
same.
side of the street. That's very comparable to the width in the 1919 courtyards they have.
Oh, it's going to be the smoking lounge. You're going to see cigarette butts on the sidewalk.
Directly across the street, walk out, it's right there in front of me.
It's a no smoking building, so they go outside onto the courtyard to smoke.
The courtyard would also not be.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm not the
Smoking on the
applicant,
roof,
so
like-
the applicant wants to
like-
answer that.
That is the answer.
That is the
Yeah.
answer.
Like a
You will
lounge
not be
on
able
the
to
roof.
smoke in the courtyard. The applicant said it. There you go.
Outdoor.
I didn't hear, I
The
couldn't.
applicant said you cannot smoke in the courtyard.
We all heard it. It's on the record now. It's on the record. Okay. Hallelujah. That's fantastic.
I'm gonna break my own rule, but, are you allowing dogs?
That's
course.
No, but I'm chairman, I can do it. Where do you have plans for dog relief area?
Colonial Village.
What are you talking about? I'm closer. They're going to come right into
They'll
my.
come across.
Okay, you don't have to answer that now, but I would like that answer.
I've answered it for you, I'll tell you.
Meeting,
Walk
if,
across the street.
if you don't have
In
it.
fact, I think it's in the picture.
Grass. Like grass.
Absolutely.
Or if you're not having dogs, then that's
But I mean,
the other answer.
where's the
That
dog?
you are allowing.
Hey,
Look,
grass
look,
on the
there's a
roof.
dog.
Pretty
There's a
dog.
dog in their illustration
hydrant on the
on
roof.
my property. Look, right there.
Are you offering?
Sarah, what's the name of your
Whoa.
dog?
My dog's name is Achilles.
Achilles.
He's a golden
Achilles.
doodle, if you want to put him in any of the renderings for next time.
I guess they could.
He
walk
knows
the
it
whole
too.
Courtyard, right?
That is literally my house.
The pet disposal places in
All
there.
right, this one's my fault and I will own it, but we're moving on. Anything else on the first set of the architecture, site design, height massing conversation? Because I want to move us to landscape and biophilia. I feel like we're there. Okay, great. Landscape, biophilia. Commissioner, tell me.
I like that you're integrating the biophilia in here. It doesn't appear to me to be tacked on. Looks like it's integral to the building. So the green walls, I really like seeing that. I'm glad to see more and more applicants are doing that. So I think that works. Now, be careful. It's not English ivy, something basic like that.
Oh, yeah.
Honeysuckle, I will presume that it should somehow that be some sort of native vines that go up that aren't going to be invasive. But yeah, that's good. And I like the trees in regards because the ones to the front will actually be visible from the street. So I think that works for me also. And a building that's taking up its entire lot, it's hard to get green in it. So wherever you're finding space for it, I think that's great. The more you can do that, the better. And even if you can have a window box in the stoops, there are all sorts of weird little things tucked away that delight the eye because they're such small details, but nonetheless are there. So that sort of creativity you're already showing that. Just encouraging if you could go even a little further. That's my only.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to foot stomp. I think it's great. I really, really like it. I don't want you to think that I'm all about sidewalk offset. I really like that. I also really like the idea of no English ivy. So foot stomp on that. I'm very much against English ivy, but yes, thank you. Thank you for all the green.
What kind of trees are going to be used?
Jeff?
Likely they will match trees up and down the boulevard, which is likely going to be willow oak. The county will ultimately determine that, but very likely willow oaks to match the existing streetscape on both sides.
Okay, good.
I'm gonna go to a couple virtual participants, Ms. Prell and then Ms. Haynes. Ms. Prell, you're up.
This, I unfortunately had a major water emergency and I had to run to the garage. Somebody hit a spigot that was blowing up over my car. So I missed the last conversation, but I came in about dogs. And it reminded me that to make sure the biophilic part stays good and the green stays good, we really don't want animals using that for their necessary purposes. Are you providing any on-site on your property for your residents to have a place for their dogs to go when the weather's bad or they can't get out, so that we keep the green and we don't have polka dotted grass?
And I'd like to remind you that I rent a space in the garage and that's off limits.
We don't currently have a space dedicated within the footprint of the building, but that's definitely.
We'll see what we get.
To
We'll talk about pet infrastructure.
Yeah.
That would be.
Terry, I asked them to determine that for the next meeting as well, for the next SPRC to have an answer, because I'd asked the same thing. Where do we go?
That would help a lot, actually.
Okay, Terry's on mute again, so I think she's good. Ms. Haynes, you're up.
Great, thank you. Yeah, English ivy, I'm going to pile on that. Also, the dogs, it does huge damage to the trees if that's where everybody ends up going. So definitely need to resolve that. Question about rooftop access. No mention of that in any of the presentations. Are you all going to have any rooftop access for residents? Could be dogs.
Good question. So the highest roof is not intended to be occupied by residents. But at the 7th floor, we have carved out an outdoor roof amenity deck that can be seen along the Clarendon facade.
And will there be landscaping up there?
There will be, yes.
Okay, so that's just not in the renderings then.
And there will be no smoking. We've established no smoking.
It shows up in the plan view rendering.
It does in the planter rendering? I'm
In
sorry.
the plan view rendering, yeah, the landscape rendering, there's a small little courtyard on the left-hand side, right at the front part of the building. That's the 7th floor terrace, which will be landscaped.
So just that corner, not the rest of the 7th floor.
Correct.
Here we go.
Right.
Okay.
So this is the view from above looking down, so you see all the levels of courtyards, but this piece here is up at level 7.
Okay, not enough room for dogs, clearly. Okay. Great, and again, kudos to you on the green walls and tree canopy. That's great that you're getting so many trees in there. That'll make a big difference in that area. So thank you.
Yes, Ms. Wong.
So, I'm gonna sort of pile on with the dogs. I'm concerned since Brompton also is, bumps up against that park on the corner. So having somewhere where the dogs can relieve themselves, not on the trees, but also not in the park, because a lot of children play in there. That would be very helpful. We would deter that being used.
Getting lots of feedback on where the puppies can't go, so. Where they can.
Poor puppies.
I did bring my dog to the site tour for this project, just for those of you who are not. Thank you. He doesn't always get that feedback. He's young, he's only 2.
Roughly 50 pounds.
Oh, really? Okay. I didn't know they could do that.
Is the, what?
Size limit on dogs.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty standard. Either a breed limit or a size limit is what I think.
Because you get like a Ridgeback or something, in 1 bedroom. Oh, I've seen it. I've seen it.
I'd have to put my dog in a diet. He's coming in at 52 pounds. There you go.
Got a cat in that direction.
All right, anything else on landscaping and biophilia? We touched on that sort of throughout even the earlier topic, so I think we've covered. I'm not seeing any other hands. Can say something if you wish to be acknowledged. No, okay. So we're gonna go to.
Well, I was just gonna,
Oh.
I just wanted to say one thing that was
Yeah.
also very much appreciate the green. That's all.
Yeah,
Just to piggyback on that too. I think if you look at this project versus the one that's next door, not to disparage anything, but they have the stoops as well. But I think what we're trying to do is create something that's a lot more visually interesting. Than what's there.
Oh, yeah. We see that and we appreciate that because you're absolutely right. 1919 has the fronts and the stoops that are literally that. They're 2 steps, if that, right? And they're boom right there. And a lot of those units are vacant, in my opinion. My impression.
And they're red at green, right? So
Right.
window, your eye level inside is the same as your eye level outside.
It's almost like, it would be like living in the front window at roadside.
I think the other thing to acknowledge, because we've working with staff over these past several months, I've heard the same comments, have tried to find ways, tightening it up as much as we can. Got about a 3'2" wide stair. So if somebody trying to carry a newly purchased couch or something in, it's gonna be a challenge. We are limited somewhat because of the grade changes. So it's not flat like Florida or my home state of Indiana or anything like that. That we've got to accomplish a happy medium with everything. With what I'm getting at is by keeping the garage, that garage is just up in this zone here. And we're held by a wall that is literally the lid for where you're trying to dive down into the garage.
That's a good image of it right there.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
perfect.
So everything we take out of here, and you can see even the offset of the building there, we're already kind of crunched.
Of course.
We can't get past this popped up wall and the lid that's over the top of it. It's a challenge. I think where see, this is a good drawing here, where that edge of the tree pit is and that edge of the stoop, there's only about 2'10", I think, where we are diminished in the dimension of 8-foot clear that the county has as a minimum.
But it comes back to what you said. I mean, those stairs are crazy narrow.
Yeah.
They're almost, according, this is the other image where it shows that the space there is 3 feet.
Yeah.
This is the Cleveland Boulevard side.
Right.
So this is exactly the set you're talking about. The total width of those stairs, including the wall, is 3 feet.
Yes.
That's not a lot.
It's somewhat, yeah. And by the 3'2" I'm talking about is clear in the wall.
Yeah, clear.
Inside.
Okay.
From the inside of the stoop wall to the face of.
No, then, but, okay, so agreed then that wall, the 6 inches or 8 inches, whatever that is, that encroaches on the width of the sidewalk naturally. Yeah.
We just didn't want some concrete step. Yeah. Some level of character to it that was quality.
Well, okay, so my idea is you guys just build townhouses that match the ones that we have and everybody's fine and we could all go home, because how can we complain about that?
I'm gonna raise something that.
And then we have one more comment, and then I'm gonna move us into wrapping up.
We lost a tree.
Okay.
Is it worth the tree to have a wider side?
Hmm.
That'll bring hands raised otherwise, but I'm
Right.
gonna just bring it up here to think
Well, let's
about
see that
that.
point, yeah.
So if we lost a tree, we would have a
Then you
wider
got
side.
that width, yeah.
Well, I think the concern is that if way it's designed, and if we're talking about having tree grades, we may lose trees anyway.
What about spacing the trees in the gaps? So, right, if, so.
But the pit itself.
I guess that is kind of, but in the gaps a little bit, so that at least, okay, you don't have a straight shot, but you do a little bit of walk around, something
The
like
pit
that.
is significantly larger than obviously.
It's a good problem. Yeah,
Everything's got a trade-off,
right.
pros and cons. Throwing it out there.
It seems like the trees are spaced to be equidistant, and I'm just thinking. Again, if they lined up with those gaps between the stoops, then that might be at least give a little bit, when you're passing the strollers, right? People can step to one side so the stroller can get past, that kind of thing. Just saying.
Never want to play chicken with a stroller.
Oh, no.
Oh, I did it quite a bit.
I cycle the Mount Vernon Trail. I know what double wide strollers look.
Stroller SUVs.
Yes, yeah.
So Ms. Wong had a comment, I think, then we're gonna move into any final comments from the group and then public comment.
Thank you. So kind of a question about the parking garage. That might be a place to put the dog amenities. But my other question was also how many spaces versus the residents and the registrants?
That does get into transportation. Sorry, you had asked the dog thing, I was allowing it, but
Right.
then we got more.
Got
so
it.
we'll-
Thank you.
No, that's okay. Transportation coming soon. Next meeting. Okay, so let's go to some final comments. Anyone, if someone already said the thing, you're like, yeah, I just want to agree with that. We don't have to repeat everyone else's comments. And yeah.
I like a lot of the things that Leo said. And as I expressed, I'm concerned particularly for the plan, the integrity of the plan, precedents, and also the impact of additional height on, because Colonial Village was also central to the plan, but Brompton's support very much many concerns there.
Are you
I
taking
think-
comments from the phone?
I think the pet infrastructure is a really good idea. Because we already have a lot of dogs coming across the street in Colonial Village because we have grass. And it's really tough to kind of manage to keep the lawns green and everything. So anything we done with pet infrastructure would be great. I had a question in entertainment. Do you want me to say that for later or is that?
Yes, save that. Doris, I heard you speaking up. Yes, you can speak now.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of the disability community, I wanted to say just a couple of things. One is generally in terms of, like the architecture and massing and stuff like that. We used to have, I work at the Independence Center in Northern Virginia, which is a community resource center for people with disabilities. So we used to have our office for a long time in courthouse. And I always found that the section where this building is going up as a little bit of an oasis, away from all of the commercial high structures that were in courthouse, and is certainly different from Roslyn. And so it sounds like, but I'm going to put the pitch in for, I think this building needs to blend with that and the whole idea of the housing, garden style apartments across the street, across Wilson and such. And, it felt kind of much more residential and or at least an oasis away when you took the whole picture together. But then as far as accessibility is concerned, I am concerned about the width of the sidewalks and the pedestrian infrastructure in that area. And so one question is, what are you envisioning as the accessible route of travel for pedestrians, including pedestrians on wheels, to public transportation? Because where that building is located right now, to get to the subway, for example, if you aren't able to roll up the hill, which is a bit steep, to the subway entrance, or walk up there, then you need to cross Wilson and take the bus up there and then cross the street up there at the traffic lights. But if you need to use the elevator, it's much more difficult, and going up on the Clarendon side is with not only the narrowness of the sidewalk, but all the light poles and other structures on the street, it really narrows. And then I was wondering about the accessibility within the project and through the courtyard, and into and out of buildings, and the pedestrian furnishings in the courtyard. And there was something mentioned about, I think, either stone pavers or brick pavers, and that's really not accessible. If it's brick pavers, you have to pick ones that are designed to be accessible and don't have the concern about the pavers over time sticking up and then causing problems for people with physical disabilities. And then I'm wondering also about the lighting, the street lighting in the area, because it would concern me if and many people with vision impairments and seniors, if you go in there and put in the high intensities that they put in up in Clarendon, because they're just blinding. They do the opposite of what they need to do for illuminating the street, at least for people with vision impairments. And I think as we continue developing, doing redevelopments and stuff, Arlington needs to consider that. And then I haven't heard too much about accessibility at the main entrances to the building, the underground parking, whether there will be automatic doors, and access to common areas of the building. And I don't know whether you're discussing it at this meeting, just the accessibility and the if there's going to be an affordable housing plan, what that would be. I don't even think I heard the total, but maybe it was me. I don't even think I heard the total of number of units, and that's it.
Doris, community benefits is where affordable housing would be addressed, and that's at the next meeting. But I think for the
I figured that. I kind of figured that. Yeah. Okay.
For the other comments, I'd like the applicant to respond.
Yeah, so I think to your first comment about the accessibility at the entrances, thinking about the user groups, people who are going to be entering the building, the first user group is the residents, right? And anyone who's trying to access into that lobby and the leasing office. And so the entrance off of Clarendon or sorry, the residential entrance off of Wilson is gonna be accessible. And the path from that sidewalk into the lobby and the leasing office and beyond into the rest of the building, the public zones inside the building all will be in compliance with ADA. The second user group is anybody who is parking for the retail. And so we have a dedicated retail parking elevator lobby also along that north facade on Wilson. Similarly, that will also be accessible. So from Wilson, you'll be able to enter directly into that lobby and elevator down to get into the garage down below. So I think those are kind of the two primary building entrances. And then any future retail storefront that gets built out, you know, once we determine the exact demising, how that retail space gets broken up, all of those doors and the height of those doors relative to the sidewalk all gets coordinated. So those will be accessible entrances as well. I think, did that answer your question about accessible entrances?
And they're gonna have fully automatic doors.
So I would think at least, we've not gotten to that point in the design quite yet, but typically at lobbies, we do have the automated doors for both the residential lobby and also at the retail elevator lobby, I would expect.
So they will be fully automatic.
I would think so, yes. Again, we're not quite that far in the design, but I would anticipate that a little further along in the process.
So one of the things about the accessibility, by the way, up to the transportation in courthouse, right? That's one thing, but the way right now most people have to deal with it or will deal with it is that they'll either go on to Wilson and they'll have to ride down to Roslyn because that's, you know, if they can't roll up that hill, that's what's going to be necessary. And because of the remoteness of the courthouse elevator, that's another reason. So that I wish we could fix that situation, you know.
Yeah, I think you
So anyway, that's
hit the nail on the head. I mean, we'd like to make the property as easy for circulating around and in and out, but we are somewhat constrained in terms of the existing grade, and that slope on the existing street sidewalk does make it a little bit tough.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I think any other final wrap up comment? We're gonna go to public comment. I believe we have one public. Two. Oh, okay. First up is. And then who's up? Okay. Mr. Bernard, you're up. You'll each have 2 minutes.
Okay. The building's footprint is much too large. There is only a small amount of open space adjacent to the building and between the sides and sidewalks and streets that contain support associated plants such as pollinators. The building should be taller and take up less ground space. The project actually has very little biophilia, although there were several green walls on which vines can climb. There are not enough. Flowering native vines should hang down from the roof and terraces and climb up on many terraces from plantings on the ground and the terraces. The building has no green roof or rooftop solar panels. Further, the streetscape and terraces should all contain plantings that will support pollinators, including monarch butterflies. The site plan contains a plant list. However, the list does not contain common milkweed, Acer, which is the most important fruit plant for monarch caterpillars in this area. Instead, the site will contain butterfly milkweed, a different milkweed. However, monarchs lay few eggs on that plant. The applicant therefore must replace butterfly weed with common milkweed. Many ornamental trees and shrubs will be cultivars. However, many cultivars are sterile. Others are toxic. Replace all cultivars with their parents if these are native to the area. Grasses will comprise about 6% of the total number of perennials and grasses. This percentage is much too high. Grasses are wind pollinated. They don't produce nectar that butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds need to survive. Federal guidance documents therefore state that to help preserve pollinator populations, grasses should comprise less than 25% of seed mix contents. I therefore hope I've sent this information to the applicant, or at least I've sent it to Ms. Badger, but nothing has happened. I made comments on the public comment opportunity. Nothing has happened. Please change it before this goes to the county board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernie Bird. Ms. Sonia Shukla.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Nice.
I just wanted to bring up what was brought up during a previous meeting with the developers at a RAFOM meeting. So I just want to make sure, Courtney, that it's on your list of things to talk about going forward, which is, I think it was Mike Warkowski. If I have that correct, I apologize if I don't. He talked about the road street safety study with Arlington County. And I apologize if you talked about it today, but I think it's really important to coordinate closely on that, because the issue which was brought up at that RAFOM meeting is that a lot of cars are turning onto Clarendon in the wrong direction. And while there haven't been a ton of accidents, there have been a lot of near accidents. And I think it would be a really good opportunity, as long as the developers are working on making everything better, if you could prioritize that for safety. I've seen actual trucks going uphill pretty fast and then just turning onto like Troy Street when they realize the mistake. So I'd like to make sure that that's just on the list of things to address.
Thank you. Ms. Prell, I see your hand is raised. Is that holdover? Because we've sort of finished the public comment and we weren't going to go back to the members.
Okay, I had a summary comment and I missed my window. I'm sorry.
Okay, real fast. I'll allow it.
I really like everything that's green about this building. I think that's really important. But I live in Roslyn and I have lost all of my sunlight. So I really would like to see the sunlight studies for them, because I can no longer grow anything on my balcony as of the last 2 years. So green is very important. Sunlight's very important. And I love the fact that you're doing greens. I think the idea of moving that tree, one tree over so it doesn't line up with the stoop is a great idea. Thank you. I think you're doing a nice job.
Thank you. I think that was a nice note to end on. Okay, what's our next meeting?
April 15th.
Great, April 15th. Hope to see all of you and some of our virtual friends in person for SPRC 2, where we will cover such things as transportation. So stay tuned. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.